She walked past him like he was furniture. Not a glance, not a pause, not even the smallest flicker of recognition in those eyes he had once memorized like scripture. She moved through the room in a tailored black suit, shoulders back, chin elevated, the kind of woman who had learned that power looks better when it doesn't apologize. Assistants hovered around her. Cameras followed her. The entire room leaned in her direction like sunflowers chasing light. And Marcus stood frozen near the far wall, a glass of water in his hand, watching the woman whose life he had purchased with pieces of his own. The soft jazz in the ballroom felt cruel suddenly. The chandeliers too bright. The applause around him too loud. Because standing just 2 steps behind her, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's rent, was Daniel, his former best friend. The man who had once cried at Marcus's hospital bedside. The man who had promised, hand on chest, that he would always have Marcus's back. Now he had something else entirely. Marcus set his glass down before his hand could betray him. He breathed once, slowly, the way doctors had taught him after the surgery. The way a man learns to breathe when ordinary breathing becomes something he has to think about. 3 years. 3 years since that operating table. 3 years since the machines, the silence, the surgeon's voice cutting through the fog, telling him the procedure had worked. 3 years since he woke up to find the bed beside his hospital room empty. Her flowers gone. Her number disconnected. 3 years of silence from the woman he had broken himself open to save. And now here she was, standing 15 feet away from him. Powerful, untouchable, alive because of what he gave, and looking straight through him like he was no one. He almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he whispered it quietly to the empty space in front of him, the words he had rehearsed in dark rooms and early mornings for 3 long years. I gave you my heart, he said, and somehow you still found a way to break it. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Marcus Adeyemi had never been the kind of man people noticed in a crowd. He was not loud. He was not wealthy. He drove a car that groaned on cold mornings and lived in an apartment where the kitchen light flickered every time the refrigerator opened. He worked as a technician at a small electrical repair shop on the east side of the city, the kind of place where people brought broken radios and cracked phone screens and ceiling fans that had stopped bothering to spin. He was 31 years old. He had quiet dreams. He liked football on Saturday afternoons. Rice's mother taught him to season properly, and the particular piece of a city street just after rain, when everything smelled clean and new and possible. He was not a complicated man, but Daniel Okafor was. Daniel had been Marcus's closest friend since secondary school. They had grown up 3 streets apart, attended the same universities, supported each other through failed relationships and job rejections, and the particular loneliness of being young men trying to build something in a city that did not always make room. Daniel had made something of himself. Corporate consulting, connections, a BMW that he never had to apologize for parking. He wore confidence the way other men wore shirts, so naturally you almost forgot he had chosen it. Marcus loved Daniel the way you love someone who has been your witness, someone who has watched you fail and stayed, someone whose name you say without thinking because they have become part of how you understand yourself. That was the first mistake. The second mistake happened on a Tuesday evening in late October when a woman collapsed just inside the doorway of Marcus's repair shop. He heard the sound before he saw her, a sharp intake of breath, then a crash as her shoulder caught the doorframe and she went down. He was around the counter before he had finished thinking. She was already trying to get up, palm pressed her chest, the color completely gone from her face. "Stay down," he said, crouching beside her. "Don't move. Just breathe." She looked up at him with eyes that were dark and exhausted and carrying something heavy that had nothing to do with the fall. Her name was Adiz. He did not know that yet. He only knew that she was shaking, that her lips had gone pale, and that the way she was pressing her hand to her chest was not the gesture of someone in passing discomfort. "My heart," she managed. "I have a condition. I have medication in my bag." He found it. Help her take it. Sat with her on the floor of his shop for 40 minutes while the rain hammered the roof and her breathing slowly returned to something that resembled normal. He did not rush her. He did not make her feel like a problem to be solved. He simply stayed. "You should be in a hospital," he told her eventually. "I'm always in a hospital," she said. And the way she said it, flat and exhausted and old with tiredness, told him everything about what her life had become. Her name was Adiz Nwosu. She was 28. She had a degree she had barely used, a heart condition she had been managing since her early 20s, and a family who had slowly, quietly, the way families sometimes do, stopped showing up. She was brilliant in the way that people are brilliant when they have spent too much time alone with their thoughts. She noticed things. She remembered details. She had plans she had written down in journals that were now collecting dust on a shelf because the body she lived in had made plans feel presumptuous. Marcus drove her home that evening. The following week, she came back to return a handkerchief she had borrowed while sitting on his floor. He made her tea. She stayed for 2 hours. It became a pattern before either of them named it. They would eat at his small kitchen table, and she would tell him about the research she had been quietly doing into sustainable business models. He would listen with his full attention, the way people do when they have realized they are in the presence of someone genuinely interesting. She would ask about his work and mean it. He would describe the quiet satisfaction of fixing something broken and returning it to usefulness, and she would smile like that metaphor meant something personal. "Every time my chest hurts," she told him one evening, watching rain move down his window, "I feel like my future is disappearing, like I'm just waiting to be over." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're not a story that ends. You are just in a difficult chapter." She looked at him then, really looked, like she was measuring whether he was the kind of man who said things he meant. "You can't know that," she said. "No," he agreed. "But I'm not going anywhere. So you don't have to face this alone." That was the sentence that changed everything. Not because it was grand, because it was true. He introduced her to Daniel about 3 weeks later, the way you naturally introduce the people you care about. They met at a dinner Marcus hosted in his small apartment. Groundnut soup and EBA and a bottle of wine Daniel brought without being asked. Daniel turned the warmth on immediately, the way he always did, filling the room with laughter and ease, and the particular gift of making people feel like the most interesting person in the space. Adiz relaxed around him. Marcus felt proud, the uncomplicated pride of a man watching two people he valued find each other likable. He did not notice the small things. The way Daniel refilled her glass before she asked. The way his questions became more specific over the following weeks, more interested in the details of her health, her family, her financial situation. The way he started arriving at places Marcus had not known would include Adiz. Marcus was not looking for betrayal. Good men rarely are. The diagnosis came in December. Marcus was in the waiting room when the doctor came out. He was there because Adiz had asked him, quietly, the night before, if he would come. She had not asked her family. She had not asked Daniel. She had asked Marcus. The doctor was calm and direct, and said the words in the order doctors use when they have learned that softening language only delays the landing. Her condition had progressed significantly. Without a heart transplant, the timeline was not in her favor. The waiting list was long. The costs were significant, and time was the resource she had the least of. Adiz sat in the plastic chair beside Marcus and did not cry. She held his hand and stared at the floor and breathed in the careful, measured way she had developed over years of managing fear. "I'm not ready," she said finally. "I know," Marcus said. "I have so much I still want to do." "I know," he said again. He held her hand tighter. Outside the hospital window, the city continued without pausing. Traffic moved. People laughed into their phones. The world maintained its complete indifference to one woman's devastating news. And Marcus sat with her in the middle of all that indifference and refused to be part of it. Daniel arrived an hour later. Marcus had called him. He came with resources immediately, the way wealthy, capable people do, offering to handle the billing coordination, speaking to administrators, making calls on his phone with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to doors opening for him. It helped. It genuinely helped. And Marcus was grateful. That was the second mistake. The weeks that followed moved in the way that medical crises move, urgently and slowly at once. Bills arrived in envelopes that felt heavier than paper. Adi's condition fluctuated. Some days she was almost herself, sharp and funny, and full of the ideas she kept tucked behind her exhaustion. Other days, she barely left bed. Marcus rearranged his entire life around her needs without making it visible. He adjusted his working hours. He learned her medication schedule. He cooked food she could tolerate on bad days. He drove her to appointments and sat in waiting rooms with a patience that had nothing performative about it. Daniel paid bills. Daniel made calls. Daniel arrived with flowers and expensive fruit baskets and the vocabulary of someone managing a situation rather than living inside one. Adiz began to see them differently. Marcus noticed it in small ways. The way she would say Daniel's name with a particular kind of relief. The way Daniel's arrivals had started to feel like events, while Marcus's presence had become simply the furniture of her survival. Necessary, assumed, unremarkable in the way that oxygen is unremarkable. He told himself it did not matter. Love does not keep accounts. In March, everything collapsed at once. Adiz deteriorated suddenly and completely, the way hearts fail when they have been patient long enough. The call came at 2 a.m. Marcus was already dressed and moving before the call ended. He drove to the hospital in 14 minutes through empty streets, running 2 red lights with his hazards on. By the time he reached her ward, the doctors were already gathered. Her body was rejecting the limits they had been carefully managing. She needed intervention immediately. The transplant list was still impossibly long. And then a doctor pulled Marcus aside. There was a procedure, experimental but proven in specific cases. A partial cardiac intervention, a living donation component combined with synthetic support that could extend her life significantly and potentially bridge the gap until a full transplant became available. It was complex. It required a donor match, and it came with serious and permanent consequences for the donor, including significant reduction in physical capacity and a recovery that would take months. Marcus asked 2 questions. The first was whether it would save her. The second was whether he was a match. The answer to both was yes. He signed the papers at 4:17 in the morning. He did not call anyone. He did not wait for daylight. He sat alone with the consent forms and a pen and signed his name with the same quiet certainty he had brought to every decision he had made about Adiz since the night she collapsed on his floor. The nurse asked him twice if he was sure. He said yes. Let's not waste more time. Nobody tells you that love can make a man volunteer for his own undoing. Nobody writes that part down. The surgery lasted 9 hours. When Marcus came out of the anesthesia, the first thing he did was ask if she was alive. The nurse said yes. He closed his eyes again and slept. She survived. She did more than survive. Within 3 weeks, Adiz's condition had stabilized in a way her doctors described as remarkable. Within 6 weeks, she was sitting up, talking, planning. The brightness was returning to her eyes in increments, like a room being slowly filled with light. And Marcus was diminished, not broken, not finished, but changed in ways the doctors had warned him about and that he was only now understanding from the inside. His stamina was reduced, his energy capped in ways that made the physical demands of his job difficult. He needed medication that cost money he did not have, especially now that he had depleted what little savings he owned during her crisis. He went back to work too soon because there was no other option. He called Adiz every day from the repair shop. The calls were shorter than they used to be. She sounded better each time, which he told himself was enough. Her voice was warmer, fuller, more alive. He held on to that. Then the calls started going to voicemail. At first he assumed she was resting, recovering, managing the overwhelming administration of her own survival. He left messages that were careful and cheerful and did not mention that he was sitting in a dimly lit shop swallowing painkillers and trying not to admit to himself that something was shifting. Then Daniel stopped calling too. There is a particular kind of loneliness that arrives not when people leave loudly, but when they simply stop returning. When the silence comes in slowly, like water under a door, and by the time you notice it, you're already standing in it. If you're still watching up to now, type "I am still here" in the comment section. Marcus started putting the pieces together on a Thursday evening in April. He had driven past Daniel's building because he still had a jacket there from before everything changed, a small ordinary reason that sent him past the parking lot just as the elevator doors opened in the lobby behind the glass entrance. He saw them before they saw him. Adiz in a soft dress, laughing at something on Daniel's phone, leaning close enough that her shoulder touched his arm. Daniel turning to say something directly into her ear. Her laughing again. Not guilty laughter. Comfortable laughter. The laughter of people who have stopped keeping secrets from each other. Marcus sat in his car for a long time. He did not storm in. He did not call Daniel's phone and listen to it ring unanswered in the lobby. He sat in the driver's seat in the April evening with his hands on the wheel and his chest, doing something complicated that he did not have a precise name for yet. He drove home. He sat in his kitchen with the flickering light, and he tried to find a version of this that made sense, the innocent explanation, the misread moment. He was good at finding those. He had been finding them for months. But the comfortable laughter did not have an innocent explanation. He knew the difference. He began to notice everything else he had been choosing not to see. Adiz's Instagram had new photos, the first she had posted in years. She was smiling in restaurants he recognized as Daniel's favorites. Corporate events with captions about new opportunities. A tag location at a private property weekend he had not been invited to. Not excluded. Not told about at all. He was not in any of the pictures. He had not been mentioned once. The man who had laid down portions of his own vitality for her survival had been quietly edited out of the story she was building. He did not eat that night. He sat in the dark apartment and let the reality land completely, without softening it, without managing it. He gave himself permission to feel the full weight of it. The grief of loving someone who had learned to live without you. The specific humiliation of having given everything to someone who found it easy to leave. The hollowness of being alive because you chose her life over your own comfort, and having that choice mean nothing to the person you made it for. He cried once, briefly, and then he stopped. He was running out of energy even for that. His health deteriorated through May. The physical demands of returning to work too soon had compounded. His employer, a decent man, but a man with a business to run, let him go quietly in June. Marcus sat at home with medicine bottles lined on his kitchen counter like a small pharmacy and unpaid bills in a stack he had stopped opening. He watched Adiz's success rise on social media with the helpless fascination of a man watching a fire he started warm someone else's house. She had joined Daniel's company. Her ideas, those brilliant sustainable business models she had described to Marcus at his kitchen table, were now being implemented with Daniel's resources and connections behind them. She was rising quickly, visibly, the kind of rise that generates its own momentum. Daniel posted about her professionally in terms that were technically collegial and unmistakably intimate. Marcus turned his phone face down most nights. He thought about calling her, wrote the message 17 times in the drafts folder of his phone, deleted each one. There was no version of the message that did not sound like begging. And Marcus was not going to beg for someone to acknowledge what he had given. He was running out of money, running out of energy, running out of the small dignities that keep a man's sense of himself intact. And then, in September, Nurse Grace called. He almost did not answer. He did not recognize the number, and he had developed a conditioned dread of unfamiliar calls, which were almost always creditors. But something made him pick up on the fourth ring. Her name was Grace Okonkwo. She had been one of the night nurses during Adiz's treatment. She had watched Marcus during those months. She said, the way nurses watch the people who truly love their patients quietly and with the knowledge that comes from seeing everything families try to manage in corridors outside closed doors. She had something to tell him. She needed to tell someone. And she had chosen Marcus because she believed he deserved to know the truth. She told him that during Adiz's treatment, someone had been making financial arrangements that went beyond ordinary bill payment. She told him that certain medical decisions had been influenced by financial pressure applied to one junior physician in particular. She told him that the experimental procedure Marcus had signed up for had been presented to him as the only option when there had been at least one alternative that carried significantly less risk to the donor. That alternative had been suppressed. She told him that the person who had suppressed it through quiet payments and strategic relationships with billing departments, had also arranged for Marcus's post-surgery follow-up care to be deprioritized in ways that extended his recovery complications. She told him the name of the person behind these arrangements. Marcus held the phone and listened to Daniel's name and felt something in his chest go very still. He asked Nurse Grace for the documents. She had them, copies she had made, because she was the kind of woman who understood that truth needs witnesses. Marcus spent 2 days doing nothing. He sat with the documents and the knowledge and the total reorganization of everything he thought he understood about the past year of his life. He moved through his apartment like a man learning the rooms again, touching walls, standing in the kitchen at odd hours, rereading the documents at the table in the early morning quiet. Daniel had not simply benefited from the situation. He had constructed it. He had used Marcus's love for Adiz as a mechanism. He had engineered the conditions that made Marcus's sacrifice feel like the only option. He had positioned himself as the generous friend while quietly ensuring that Marcus's post-surgery life would be difficult enough to push him to the margins. And he had been slowly, methodically drawing Adiz into a professional and emotional dependency that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with control. The company she was rising inside was Daniel's. Her ideas were being executed under his ownership. Her success was being built on a foundation that Daniel controlled entirely. She was not free. She was managed, and she may not have known any of it. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday, the same day of the week she had first walked into his shop. He had called her, finally, with a single text that said only, "I need you to meet me." Not Daniel. Just you. It is important. She came. She walked into the small cafe near his apartment with the caution of someone who does not know what version of a conversation they are walking into. She was more polished than he remembered. The illness had left her, and something harder and more guarded had moved into its place. She sat across from him and folded her hands on the table and looked at him with eyes that were trying to be neutral. "Marcus," she said. His name in her mouth, after all this silence, felt like a physical thing. "How are you?" he said. "I am okay." A pause. "You look tired." "I have been tired for a while." She looked away briefly, then back. "I should have. I am not here for an apology," he said. "Not cruelly. Simply, I am here because there are things you need to know. And I think you deserve to know them, even if it costs me the last thing I have left, which is the peace of walking away quietly." He put the documents on the table between them. He watched her read. He watched her face go through the stages. Confusion first, then a frown deepening, then a particular quality of stillness that was not calm, but was the thing that comes just before something breaks open. She read slowly. She read everything. She went back and read 2 sections again. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "I did not know," she whispered. "I believe you," Marcus said, and he meant it. "I thought you pulled away," she said. Her voice was cracking at the edges now. "After the surgery, your calls became shorter. You sounded different. Daniel said you seemed resentful, that you were struggling with what you had given and that you needed space. He said," she stopped, pressed her lips together. "He said you had told him you needed distance from me to recover properly." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "I never said that." "I know," she said. "I know that now." The tears came now, quiet and controlled the way Adiz had always cried, like she was trying not to take up too much space even with her grief. "I was so vulnerable. I had nothing and no one, and he was there. He was always there. And I told myself I deserved something good after everything. I told myself that maybe you needed the distance. I told myself," she stopped again. "You told yourself what you needed to believe," Marcus said. "That is not a crime. I carried what you gave me every day," she said. "Every morning when I woke up and felt my heart working, I thought about what it cost you. I was ashamed of myself even before I knew this. I was just too ashamed to face you." The cafe was quiet around them. A distant coffee machine. The murmur of other people's ordinary conversations. "He is not going to let you go easily," Marcus said. "Your ideas, your position, the direction of the company. He controls all of it. You need to understand that the thing you have built your future inside belongs to him, and he designed it that way." She was quiet for a long moment. "What do I do?" "You document everything. Your original concepts, your timelines, your written proposals with dates. You find a lawyer. You find people inside the company who have seen enough to speak. And you make sure that when you leave, you take what is genuinely yours. And Daniel, the documents go to the right people. Marcus said simply. Fraud leaves paper. Medical negligence leaves records. He was careful, but not careful enough. She looked at him across the table. Why are you helping me? After everything. Marcus thought about it honestly. Because you're not the villain in this story, he said. You were used the way I was used, just in a different direction. What followed was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, systematic unraveling. Adiz made copies of everything she had created. She found allies, 2 senior staff members who had grown quietly uncomfortable with Daniel's methods. She engaged a lawyer through a contact at a former university, a woman who specialized in intellectual property and corporate fraud. The documents Nurse Grace had provided went to a medical regulatory board. The financial irregularities went to auditors who had been watching Daniel's company for other reasons. The threads, once properly pulled, unraveled with the efficiency of something that had always been waiting to be unraveled. Daniel's response when the investigation became public was the response of someone who had always believed his intelligence made him untouchable. He hired expensive lawyers. He released statements. He performed outrage. It did not save him. It rarely does, in the end. The luxury corporate event, where Marcus had watched Adiz walk past him, was 3 months after the investigation became public. He had been invited by a mutual contact, one of those coincidences that feel like the universe making a point. He had almost not come. He had stood at his apartment door for 10 minutes, jacket half on, before deciding that he was not going to arrange his life around avoidance anymore. He had not known she would be there. When she finally saw him that evening, really saw him, it was across the room near the window, and she stopped moving completely for a moment. The assistants around her continued forward 2 steps before they noticed she had paused. She said something quiet to one of them, and they drifted. And then she walked toward Marcus alone. I looked for you, she said when she reached him. After everything, I wanted to find you properly. Not by message. I moved, Marcus said simply. I know. Grace told me. A pause. She's been looking out for you. She's a good woman. Adiz looked at him steadily. The company is mine now. Properly mine. The intellectual property case settled. Daniel's appeal was denied last week. She said it without triumph, which Marcus appreciated. I wanted you to know. I'm glad, he said. And he was. She searched his face for something. Are you well? Better than I was, he said. Slower, but better. I'm sorry, Marcus. The words were direct and undecorated. Not the performative apology of someone managing their own guilt, but the plain offering of someone who had looked clearly at what they had done and found it wanting. Not for a specific moment. For all of it. For letting myself be told a story about you, when I should have come to you myself. He nodded. He accepted it in the way that it was given, simply and without theater. Are you happy? He asked. She considered it seriously. I am working on it, she said. I think that is the most honest answer I can give. That is enough, Marcus said. They stood together for a moment in the noise of the event, 2 people who had been through something enormous and had come out the other side, changed in ways that could not be undone, only carried. Then Marcus set down his glass and buttoned his jacket. Take care of yourself, he said. Build something real. He walked out of the ballroom into the night air. The city spread around him in its usual indifferent brightness. His chest was quieter than it had been in years. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of something that has finally stopped fighting against itself. He walked slowly because he had learned to walk slowly. He breathed carefully because he had learned what breathing costs. And somewhere in the distance, the city made its city sounds, traffic and voices, and the particular hum of 1,000,000 people moving through their own complicated stories. He was not the man he had been before Adiz walked into his shop. The sacrifice had taken something permanent. He would carry the weight of that for the rest of his life. But he was still here. And some mornings, when the light came in at the right angle and his chest was quiet and the day was still open in front of him, he thought that perhaps that was enough. Perhaps being still here, changed but upright, broken in some places but honest all the way through, perhaps that was its own kind of victory. Some people break your heart. Others reveal how strong it truly is. And sometimes the people who leave your life are only making room for the person you were always meant to become. If this story moved you, share it with someone who understands what real sacrifice looks like. Drop a like so more people can find stories like this. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next story. We release new stories every week, and each one is built to stay with you long after it ends. Next time, we are telling the story of a woman who disappeared on her wedding night and returned 10 years later with a child nobody could explain. You will not want to miss it.